You there, and welcome to another episode of A Spoonful of Theatre, Singapore's only theatre podcast.
I'm TJ, theatre practitioner, director and performer.
And I'm Sam, a teacher of language, literature and self-proclaimed show business lovey.
This is our podcast where we spill the tea on all things Singapore theatre. It's tea time!
And today's episode is the second of our special Singapore Fringe Festival mini-series.
And we are interviewing Cultural Medallion winning playwright Haresh Sharma.
Yes, it is our pleasure to have a giant of Singapore theatre join us, and of course, we're going to ask him about the rather turbulent journey of getting to this year's Singapore Fringe Festival.
But for now, pop the kettle on,
Grab a bicky,
and let's add a spoonful of theatre to sweeten up your day. Sam, I am so excited for today's episode.
Ooh, this one's a bit juicy, I think.
It is, and do you know what? It's so lovely to have such a pillar of the Singapore theatre community. Haresh has written some of Singapore's best plays over the years, and on top of that, obviously, is one of the spearheads of the Singapore Fringe Festival, which is going so well right now. And I hope a lot of our listeners have already booked their tickets to go and watch, or have watched by this point when you listen to this podcast. Because for me, Fringe festivals are so important, and it's a space for people to try things out. And the fact that Singapore has this and it's survived and is continuing to thrive is amazing.
I cannot wait for Haresh to share that journey of it being saved. I mean, you think of the Fringe festivals that you and I have both seen. Like, I think of Edinburgh, which is huge. I mean, it goes on practically over a month.
Yep.
And yet there was a danger of this 2-week Fringe festival of not happening. So, I cannot wait for Haresh to share his story. Shall we get into it?
Absolutely. Sam, we're joined by our first Cultural Medallion winner.
Theatre royalty.
Indeed.
Indeed. Hello, our dear friend Haresh. Hello.
Hi, hello, nice to be here.
How are you?
I'm good. Busy with rehearsals, of
Yes.
course. I'm sure everybody starts off saying the same thing. Busy with rehearsal. Either we're coming from a rehearsal, we're rushing off to a rehearsal.
That's the life of theatre, though, isn't it? There's all those t-shirts today. Sorry, I'm late. I have rehearsal and all of that sort of things. But the beautiful life, why we do what we do, right? So, but particularly special though this year with the Fringe Festival, because obviously a lot has happened over the last year with the Fringe Festival. We have a new iteration almost, don't we? So, why don't you just start chatting about how we got here this year, because it's been a journey.
It has been a journey. I mean, for those who are not aware, the Singapore Fringe Festival used to be sponsored, and we had major telco as a sponsor. I'm not sure if I should say their name anymore. But it was great. For like 20 years, they gave us money, and that really helped with our programming. And part of the Fringe is about platforming younger artists, and so that was also very helpful in terms of commissioning younger artists to give them opportunities to have their first play, or the first play they're directing, or they have some ideas that they want to try out. And we are an established company, The Necessary Stage, and we work with organizations like Esplanade. So and for many of these younger artists, it's also an opportunity for them to have their first works at a venue like the Esplanade. So, but sadly, 2025 was our last Fringe under a sponsor or a title donor. So we had to think about really what are we going to do, what's going to happen to the future. And so we had like a call for donations, and it was amazing because we managed to raise 50,000. We asked for 50,000 and we managed to raise 50,000.
Incredible.
Yeah, and the bulk of it actually came from your average Joe, your average artist, people who have been involved in the Fringe for the past 20 years, and they supported by even like not just making donations, but also like by making videos so that we could use the videos to spread the word, because some of these artists started out as new artists, as emerging artists in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and then now they're doing biennales and they're traveling around the world, so they're much more, well known, and so that really helped as well, to spread the word. So when we got the donations, and we were very, very happy and very relieved, we managed to say let's just go with it. Let's take it year by year.
Yep.
Which means that we can't rest on our laurels. We meaning everyone, because we managed to raise enough to have this festival in 2026, but we still need to fundraise for 2027.
Yeah.
And I know people are sick of it because especially around this period, end of the year, early year, they get lots of emails and calls for people saying, please help us, and I feel it because I know a lot of people from other theatre companies, they do need the support as well. But it's just that this is a festival we're talking about, and it's the only Singapore Fringe Festival that's around, and we really want to continue creating work, curating work, and giving more platforms to younger artists.
I think it's very interesting because obviously when I was at Sing Theatre, we did the Singapore Musical Theatre Fringe Festival, and when we were looking for sponsorships, actually we found a lot of the grants actually didn't sponsor festivals. They sponsored individual shows, but they wouldn't sponsor a whole festival.
Exactly, yeah.
Which I always used to get very frustrated at. I was like, this is a loophole that I was like, but this festival is going to give so many artists and so many performers work, but yet. Obviously, it's great to support one show, but here you're supporting multiple. So I think it is really important to have people like sponsors if you're going to do the whole festival because of that, right?
Yeah.
But then without that, obviously, then it really has to be grassroots and people supporting. So it's very important for everybody to get involved to make sure the Fringe happens every year, like you say.
No, and it's important having festivals because at least it's an opportunity one for artists to kind of get together. We get to see what each other is doing. We are presenting works that may have, thematic connections to one another. And it's also important for the audience because they get to see different shows happening around the same time. And we, like for this year, we also have 2 panel discussions. So one of them is about representation, and the other, funnily enough, it's about the end or the death of Fringe. Because it's like, are we reaching a point where everything is becoming more and more mainstream, and therefore Fringe works, and by Fringe works I mean exploratory works, cutting edge works that may not be perfect, but need to be shared with an audience. What's going to happen to them.
So for you, I mean, both myself and Sam are massive Fringe fans,
Yes.
and both of us have been going to the Edinburgh Fringe for years and things like that. And that, like, for us, the Fringe is a really important platform for, like you say, everything you just said about new artists, new works and things. We always talk about Singapore as a developing art scene. I think the Fringe has been a really important part of that journey. So over the last few years, producing it obviously for many years, what has been some of your proudest moments of the Fringe, and why should that continue going forward?
I mean, there are so many, because it's been around for more than 20 years. And every few years, we kind of look at what the scene is like, what the audience wants more of or less of. And in the early days, we used to have a huge Fringe festival. We even had like music and dance and film, visual arts. We used to have galleries and invite artists from around the world, because we would have an open call, and lots of artists would submit their portfolio, their videos, and then we would like select. And so there were times when we would have like 15 works, 20 works. And those were good times. They were so tiring. Looking back, I don't even know how we managed.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's like, how did we do that? And we would have shows back to back, like 2 days. We would team up with like gallery spaces, or even like malls which have galleries that we were able to put our artworks there. We were able to kind of team up with like big organizations like the National Museum, besides the Esplanade. So we had a lot of really fun times. But I think my most kind of favorite kind of aspect of the Fringe is really looking at the new works by the new up and coming artists. we had our fresh fringe, for a while, where we would have like simple stagings of works by new works. And so, even though we have a pared down fringe at the moment, we still want to keep to that spirit of platforming the future voices of Singapore theatre.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I love from it all is that it's the community that made it survive. Bugger all the corporate who have their ledgers and their spreadsheets and their are we in the black or are we in the red. It's the community that kept it alive, and that's a real testament to the performing arts community in Singapore, I say.
But I think actually what's really lovely is the fact that the community came together to make it happen this year. It just shows the strength of the community that we do have in Singapore,
Exactly.
And that only comes from the previous years of building it and having such a strong connection with it as well. So it's really a community festival now, which is wonderful.
No, and we were very fortunate because even when we did have a sponsor, the sponsor was kind of hands off.
Okay.
Which is very, very important because you already have a National Arts Council, you already have an IMDA, you're already submitting your scripts.
Yep.
You're already getting your licenses and all of that. You don't need another kind of censorship or authority figure.
Too many cooks.
Who come in and say, oh, why do you have this kind of show or that kind of show? So in that sense, that really helped us grow as well. And even when in the past, when we went through certain controversies, and why not? Because we are a fringe festival. Of course, we will caught controversy. For some reason or other, if some license didn't get through, or some nudity that people have issues with, or whatever.
Of
right?
course,
The sponsor, always kind of like say, never mind, just go ahead and carry on and just do what you want to do. And that's something very, very rare. It's very difficult to find, sponsors like that.
Yeah. I think in general, though, I mean, actually for quite a few of our listeners, if they're not involved in the art scene, they might not realize the extent that actually sponsors, even outside of Fringe, actually do prop up quite a lot of our local art scene, because to make shows financially viable and be able to go on, actually these sponsors that you see on the program are a vital part of being able to get that show on the stage.
And the thing is that, for sponsors that are interested in like charities, they already have a choice of like the arts versus, like schools, education, or like
dogs or
whatever. And the arts, I mean, to be honest, we are kind of lower in the rank because they rather give a school or they give to like President's Star Charity or something like that. And within the arts, there's of course film and music and theatre. And so, music is always considered safe because you're just listening to music. Whereas theatre is like, oh, is that going to be offensive? Should I put my money in this? Will people get upset? Will I get complaints from my, like customer base? And so, theatre becomes a little bit of a problem sometimes for some of these sponsors because they want safer, artists or works that they can invest their money in.
Going back to what you said earlier, having a sponsor that was happy for you to be less, not safe and kind of push the boat out in a Fringe, which is a core value of what Fringe is about. It's about, and I think in a country where we are quite censored with our art, and we have to submit everything to IMDA, and there is, I still think of the censorship play that Alfian wrote there, which I think beautifully summed up the censorship scene here. It is everything. If we want a successful art scene, we have to have the space to grow and play, and also get things right and wrong. I think one of the beautiful things I always love going to any Fringe festival is, especially in the bigger ones, you go and sometimes you get an absolute hit, and sometimes you're like, oh my goodness, what were they thinking? Which I think the nice thing here actually is, I think what the lineup that we have this year, I don't think there's going to be any of those. But it is a space for people to play and try something new and be daring. And that's really the essence of what Fringe is about, right?
Exactly. And I mean, even if I were to speak not about the Fringe, I feel that we do need more of such spaces. I don't know. I mean, as a theatre company, the necessary stage, we've had programs where we try to, have exploration. We used to have this program called the Orange Playground, where we would just bring artists together, and then we just like, okay, what are we going to explore? Let's spend like 40 hours and just explore. Let's just play. Let's just do something. Maybe we'll get a choreographer. Maybe we'll get 3 dancers and 3 actors. Maybe we'll get, a multimedia artist, and let's just spend the, next 2 weeks exploring with no baggage, with no any kind of expectation that it has to be a show.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing about working in Singapore, is that you don't start something unless you know it's going to end up being a show. And so those kind of spaces, what we would normally call the R&D spaces, they're so lacking in our theatre, context.
But I think that leads me nicely onto my next question, that in other scenes, people do have that space to try and to play, and they're often sponsored by the National Arts Councils or equivalents, because it's like, just go try, see. It doesn't matter if it doesn't turn into something. There's no product required, but people do need to still eat. So often they are sponsored. So I think here, as obviously a very successful playwright, how is it for you? What is the importance for you in Fringe when you're writing a new work to try something out? Do you use the Fringe as a space to try something a bit different versus when you're writing for a more commercial or a bigger piece? Like, what's the difference for you as a playwright?
I mean, that's interesting. Sometimes maybe, consciously I don't think about it, because I'm always trying to write something different. I'm always trying to explore something different, whether I'm writing it for the Fringe or whether I'm writing it just as a piece that the Necessary Stage will be presenting. Like, for example, in this case, this is the first time that the Necessary Stage is collaborating with Artdis. So the play is called Invisible, and Artdis is a charity organization that focuses primarily on disability arts and disability artists. So Peter Sao, who is head of theatre, had approached me a couple of times in the past 2-3 years to work with their artists. And so it was interesting for me because prior to that, I had not quite worked with the disability arts area, because we are just so used to working with our own kind of lane and working with the artists that we're familiar with, or having auditions that suddenly you're like, oh, there's this, and I found it very, very exciting. I had to relearn things. I had to discover new things, and I enjoyed it. That was the most important thing for me, was that I enjoyed it also because I never knew what was going to happen next. Like, I didn't know what to expect.
What sort of things did you discover? What sort of things did you learn?
I mean, you would think that, because you see, I'm so used to doing a playwriting workshop or a devising workshop, but then you enter a room and there are like 10 different artists, and one is on some kind of a machine that he has to breathe into, because if not, he can't live. And a couple of people are, having difficulty kind of assessing or accessing what you're trying to say. And so you're like, I can't just do a conflict circle, because somebody's on a wheelchair, maybe they can't move around so easily. Somebody's having difficulty trying to understand what you mean by conflict. What is character? What do I need to do? Or somebody might be, on the spectrum, and therefore they need some time out. So there are all kinds of things that you take for granted in your own ableist world of theatre, and suddenly you realize that, okay, I need to scaffold this more. Maybe we need to have a chat about where are you from, what are you about, and what are you interested in, and why do you want to do theatre. And then maybe we can take another step in terms of like, okay, let's just talk about, if let's say you were to embody another character, what does that mean? Because if you say improvisation, they might not even understand what that means.
Right.
So then you can just, you're just drawing from your experience, but at the same time, you're also listening a lot more. You're being a lot more attentive to what are the needs of the people that you're supposed to be teaching. And so that's just one example, you know.
Now, I'm going to put my literature nerd cap and say that there's a lot of different meanings behind that title. Would you mind sharing that?
I want to try and say it in a very simple way. In the sense that when I started working on this play, and I knew the play was going to be about disability of some sort, because we are working with a disability organization, Art Days, and we have one actor who has a disability, Down syndrome, and so I knew that was going to be an element of that, but I just wasn't very sure what exactly. And then I started to do more research, and I found out that there's this thing called invisible disability, which is shocking. Like if you were to Google invisible disability, you would see that there are a lot of things. Learning disabilities, reading disabilities, of course, autism, ADHD, but even things like diabetes, depression. You know, as long as you have an ailment that is something that you are secretive about, that you feel ashamed to talk about, that you feel like talking about might put you at a disadvantage in some way, that could be considered an invisible disability. And so I thought, okay, that is something that I feel can be a bridge between the so-called hardcore disability versus the kind of mass disability. Because I'm sure we've all had that in some way. And I related to it because I'm getting older. So I can't see as well. You know, if walking sometimes is a little bit more difficult, climbing stairs, and you realize that you took these things for granted when you were younger, and then suddenly now it's like you need to rest more. You know, previously you could go for rehearsal at night and then, you know, finish at 6 and then go for a show and then go for supper and come back. I can't do that anymore because I just cannot anymore. So anyway, so Invisible became the title because I felt that at one level of the play, these women, there are 4 characters, 4 actors, and there are 4 women, each have a kind of invisible disability, and they have difficulty talking about it, and they kind of feel like they themselves are invisible because, you know, it's not something that your disability is not something that is seen. You know, and sometimes when you have a disability that is seen, then it is easier. Like if you take a train, if you have a very obvious disability, people will offer you a seat. But if you don't, and if you need a seat because of your disability, you might get strange, you know, looks from people around you. I mean, that's just a very simple way of putting it. But yeah, so I really wanted to play with the idea of invisibility in terms of how people feel, what kind of illnesses they have, and also as women, you know, what can they do to be more visible, to be more accepted, to form a community.
With my students at the moment, we've just been studying perspective, and we've been looking at Mask, the 1985 film with Rocky Dennis with his Lionitis, and we've been looking at disability and how that's perceived, and the kids have thoroughly enjoyed it. There was an aspect in the title that made me think about invisible in wider society. This is where I'm making the connection between what I've been doing with my students, like, oh, if you do have even a visible disability, you are still invisible because society disregards you. And is there that element in it as well?
Definitely. So, I mean, there are also kind of characters that are talked about in the play who have non-invisible or visible disabilities, and even that is a struggle. I mean, part of the process for creating this work was doing research. So I interviewed family members and and caregivers of people with disability. I interviewed social workers and people working in the field, and you really get to see that there are people who have difficulty assimilating. There's difficulty with being in a social context, or even with funding, or trying to get fund, or going for taking part in programs. And I think that the government, when you read about it, you realize that there's more that's happening, and there's more support that's coming in. But at the same time, Singapore is also aging very quickly. So there's also talk about where the disability housing, how can they be independent? Because that's what parents are worried about. What happens when we are no longer around, and who's going to take care of our, our kids? So that's like the next step, in terms of how can they survive on their own? What kind of community can they have? What kind of housing? What kind of social support networks? And it's the same thing, I guess, with seniors as well, because that's what is also kind of the discussion in terms of, in the future, are they going to have their senior homes, and the homes will be kind of built in such a way that will be senior friendly.
Yes.
So I think that those two discussions need to be had at the same time,
Yes.
the disability community and the senior community.
As a writer, I'm really interested in the process, because I think obviously we've got the really wonderful kind of aim of kind of showing this on stage and kind of making the invisible visible. What is your process of taking such a sensitive topic and something you have to deal with quite sensitively, to making entertainment and to making something that people connect with? What was your process for this show of kind of piecing it together as a show? What style did you choose? Did you go through multiple iterations? What was that process like?
Yeah, no, it was interesting because I always like to think of a structure first. And in this case, because there were 4 main characters, I wanted a setup where the 4 of them could meet. And so there was one, somebody I interviewed who talked about how sometimes disabled people are asked to work, in bakeries or at a hotel and housekeeping, and sometimes there are some problems because the way they work might be different from what the employers are expecting from them. But that's just because they have a different way of working. It's not their fault, So I thought that might be an interesting place to start. So I had a character who is disabled working at the hotel, with disabled as in she has an intellectual learning disability. And then another character is the housekeeping supervisor, and then there is the hotel manager, and then there is the guest of the hotel who lost something, and then after that there's a whole lot of drama about where is it and why can't we find it and all of that. But as the play goes on, we start to go deeper into each character. So you have the conflict at the hotel, and then after that, Act 2 or Part 2 is X's story, and then after that it goes back to the hotel, and then the next part is Y's story. So then we get to kind of enter each woman's lives and backstory in a clear and interesting way. So each story has its own style. It could be in a kind of storytelling, or it could be in a very use of mythology and storytelling, or it could be done as a song and dance element. Because so there's one part where it goes into a song and dance element because the character is kind of getting a little bit delirious. So I try to find different ways of telling the different character stories, so that from an audience point of view also, they would not feel like it's just this, kind of boring and it's always the same way of doing things. So that's one of the things that I like about playwriting, that it doesn't always have to be done in the same way.
Talk about playwriting. Haresh, how does one become a playwright? I've been dying for us to have a writer in the studio, so it's our pleasure for you to be the first writer and local writer. How does one become a playwright?
What I guess the question I have to ask is, what do you mean when you say, what is a playwright? Like, how do you? If you ask me, how does one write a play? I can say yes. Anyone, you can write a play. I can teach you, and you'll write a play. But does that mean you're a playwright?
Oh, what a
So what does that
fabulous reply.
Does it even matter?
Right.
You know, it matters if you want to do it more, or if you want to do it as something that is like sustained, continuous, full time. But if you want to write a play because you have something to say, I think I will support you 100% because that is so much easier. But if you say, I want to be a playwright, I don't know how to help because I don't know what that means.
So where did your interest in writing begin?
I think I'm just like those arts theatre kids, like from school. I was always interested in creativity and using my imagination, reading, watching TV, and I always loved writing. That was something that was like, even in school, if there was any opportunity to write, I would write, and I would do that. In primary school, secondary school, junior college, like even for like school magazine or anything that required writing, I would like volunteer and want to do it. And I tried poetry, short stories, those compositions and all of that. But when I started writing my first play, suddenly everything clicked. Like it almost felt as if like the light shone on me, and I just said, "This is it. This is what I want to do. This is the writing that I want to do." Because everything else before that was like fun, but it didn't mean that I wanted to do it all the time. It didn't feel like I was going to, like I wanted to develop it further. Whereas when I wrote my first play, I immediately felt I want to write another one. I want to get this stage. I want to write another one, and I want to write another one. And ironically, that's what's happened.
Were there any sort of early inspirations in the writing world or in the performance world that sort of influenced your early works?
So, because I started, with the Necessary Stage from the beginning, 1987, at that time there wasn't a theatre studies department, at the universities. I think they didn't even have drama schools. I think those like La Salle and all that only started in like 1990 onwards. So it was really just literature that we went on. And the people around us who had more experience. So my teachers at university, who when they knew I was interested in playwriting or in theatre, they would like recommend books or journals. When I started out, I was also kind of inspired by Kuo Pao Kun, who was doing very interesting work at that time. And so, he used to talk about the theatre being an empty space, and you bring whatever you want to it, and the most important thing is the actor and the space. And so when you start writing plays, and that was kind of in your head all the time, your writing style also kind of changes to fit that mold. So I never had this kind of like, the 3-act play or the 4-act play breathing down my neck. Like, oh, your play must be chronological, or your play must follow the unities of time and space, and none of that. So the first play I wrote had no unity of time and space. It was like non-chronological. We had different characters. It was ensemble based, and it was so much fun. And on top of that, I'm not a playwright that just writes a play and then just says, here's a play, okay, here's the play, okay, bye. I want to be in the rehearsal process. I want to rewrite in the rehearsal process. I want to work with the actors and the directors and be involved. And that is something that I was very fortunate to have with the company, even to today. So even to today, when I write a play that is for someone else or for outside the company, it's always very difficult for me to let go. I'm always like, I want to attend rehearsals, or I want to watch the video of the rehearsal, just because I'm so used to being part of it.
Yes.
And of course, because the Singapore theatre scene was still new at that time, where do we look at? Of course, we looked at the West, because we were not familiar with our neighbours, because we didn't know what kind of English language theatre was happening, because we were the English language theatre. We so looked at other English language theatre. So of course, a very big influence was Carol Churchill, because at that time, she was writing plays like Light Shining in Buckinghamshire, Top Girls, Cloud9. I would read about Joint Stock Theatre Company, which was led by Max Stafford Clark and others. And so then, sometimes we also had opportunities to attend conferences overseas, sponsored by the British Council. And so then, I got to meet some of the contemporary, theatre artists in the UK, in London, in Glasgow. And so, you kind of see what other people are doing, what kind of styles they are writing in at that time, and those were also kind of influences.
And what sort of stories are you hoping to tell next?
I have no idea. I'm working in a new play, which is for later this year, and I'm devising it, and that's exciting because I enjoy starting with not knowing what the play is going to be about. It's just me, the director, 3 actors, and then we'll work that out.
You'll play.
We'll play,
Yes.
and then we'll work it out. Because that's the kind of process that I like most. Yeah.
Oh, that's so much fun. I envy you, man. I absolutely envy you. Is there a work that you're particularly fond of? That you just love? It's your child. You absolutely love it to death.
I've been asked this before, and I end up saying yes to one play for no other reason, not because it's my child or my favorite or anything else, but because it's the play that dared to do more. And that play is called Off Center. And so it was a play that almost didn't get stage. We were commissioned in 1993, and then we were decommissioned. Long story. But we went on with it. We staged it. And then it was so successful. People were queuing up every evening to watch the play. People were not wanting to leave the theatre after the play ended. And then after that, the play, and most plays in Singapore, you have 1 or 2 stagings and it's over. But this play became the first Singapore play to be selected as a GCEO and N-level text in 2006.
Oh, wow.
So suddenly, Off Center by me is a play that you can select together with Ibsen and Shakespeare and Shaw, And so schools around Singapore are like, maybe I should go for this local play instead of the Shakespearean play, because my students might relate to the characters more. And the students did relate to the characters more. And I would go around schools like giving talks to students, and they will be so excited because they've been studying this play, and then the playwright appears, and so Off Center, it's been done as a telemovie. It's a school text. It was selected by Esplanade, when we had our SG50 in 2005. And so it was given a restaging then. So it's always there.
Yes.
And even today, I get people saying like, "Oh, I read your play in school."
That was going to be my next question. Yes.
And I'd be like, and I say, do you like it? Say, we loved it very much, or or we did well in our
Yes,
literature,
as a literature teacher, there is something to be said about accessing texts that you can relate to and that are relevant to your identity, your culture, your background. Now, as an international school teacher, that's a lot more difficult because I've got a Singaporean, an Indonesian, and somebody from China, and we're learning English literature, so it tends to be your Shakespeare and your. But there's something to be said about this. This book I'm studying is about me, and therefore I'm going to do well at literature because I'm engaged in this text. There's something definitely to be said about that.
I feel like in terms of identity, just swinging back around now to the festival, what's really interesting this year, because it's a bit smaller, I think, like you said, in the past, you've maybe had works coming in as a fringe from around the world. It feels like we're focusing this year very much on Singapore stories and Singapore identities in various forms. So I think, is that something that's maybe, I think has the Fringe always been about promoting Singapore stories, and how important is that in the Fringe when you're kind of commissioning works this year?
Yeah, I think Singapore stories definitely, that is at the very base of what the Fringe is about.
Yeah.
It's just also, we're also interested in what kind of Singapore stories or how you want to tell the Singapore stories, because some people want to tell it in a very, simple storytelling, character-based way. Some people might want to tell it in a punk rock way, or with very movement, or with sound or exploration. So we're also looking at what kind of, what's in the mind of these artists. It's interesting because actually some of the works are also quite queer, So we have a lesbian love story, the musical, which is about lesbian relationship. And there's one work from Taiwan, which is about a young man who, likes to karaoke. But then there's more than that too. It's also about his story as a queer man in Taiwan. So I think sometimes it just happens that, these are the works that are in alignment. And so then it kind of feels like, okay, this fits nicely to the whole curation of the Fringe for this year.
So with that, what obviously you've mentioned quite a lot of the shows there. So audiences hopefully are going to flock to this and support it and keep it going. So obviously we've got your show coming up, which we mentioned a lot about. Tell us a couple of other things about the Fringe Festival we should be excited by, and also how we find out more information about where all of this is at.
Okay, I think the Fringe is happening from the 15th of January till the 25th. So there are 2 shows the first weekend and 2 shows the second weekend. Invisible is taking place from the 21st to the 25th. You can find all the information at the website, www.singaporefringe.com, or at the Necessary Stage website, www.necessary.org. Or, of course, you can go to our Instagram, Facebook pages. Just search the Necessary Stage and you'll find it. Or you can look for SG Fringe and you can find it. So all the information is there. We also have 2 panel discussions that are coming up on the Saturdays. So the first one is about representation, which is really important because we don't talk enough about representation, and so the artists of the different plays will get a chance to share with the audience, how they created the work or what they think about representation in their work and in general. And then the second panel discussion, it's about cheekily titled "The Death of the Fringe," and I think it's also partly because we were thinking about something like the projector, which was we shut down. And that was a very important Fringe space, for many, many people. And was it coincidentally that it happened around the same time as the Fringe almost, closing down? So what's going on in Singapore? Is it the end of the Fringe?
slightly positive, though, the recent news is it's been taken over, the venue, I read 2 days ago. So I think what's really lovely in terms of a positive thing is the Singapore Fringe Festival isn't going anywhere. It's back. It's supported by community, and somebody has taken over the projector space and will be running it as a indie theatre as well. So I think, I think this is probably a great topic. We're already talking about your panel discussion, so let's go there and listen to the panel. But I think there is definitely a hope and a future for all of these things. But I think for me, the lesson is that it needs to be supported by the audiences and the artists.
Exactly.
And everyone needs to get behind it. And I think we have an amazing theatre scene here that just needs the community behind it as well. So I have absolutely loved our talk today. Thank you so much for coming down.
No, thank you for doing this, and thank you for having this platform, because I think there needs to be more people talking about Singapore plays, Singapore, reviewing it, talking about things you've just watched, talking about artists that are creating, because if not, and I'm not making like a rant or anything, but a lot of artists have things to say, and they need platforms, so that the audience will get a chance to find out more about what's happening behind the scenes. I think there needs to be a lot more discourse. So thank you so much for being part
our
of
pleasure.
that.
And that's why, listeners, you should always like, share and subscribe any of the things A Spoonful of Theatre does so that everybody can hear those voices.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much, Haresh, for coming down.
Thank
We
you.
loved having you. Thank you so much. And all the best for the Fringe. And we look forward to many more Fringes to come in the next few years.
Thank you
Cannot
so
wait.
much.
All the best with Invisible. Thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you. Sam, we had our first writer.
Pinch me. Pinch me. We have finally had a writer in the studio, and I loved some of his more cryptic answers. And that shows a writer's mind. Like the moment he said, "What do you mean by playwright?" I'm like, "Oh, you writer, you absolute writer for coming back at me like that."
I love keeping you on your toes.
But what a gentleman and a scholar. Absolutely a scholar.
Honestly, I really hope our listeners really enjoyed that. There was so much to take away, so much to learn. And what I really enjoyed, of course, we got into the writing bits, and that's really interesting. But for me, I really resonated with that struggle of putting on a Fringe Festival.
Oh, yes.
Because obviously for myself, producing the Singapore Musical Theatre Fringe Festival, it is a struggle. Well, producing anything in Singapore is really tricky. Actually,
Yes.
as audiences, you rock up, you see the show, but to make anything in Singapore theatre happen, actually, sponsorship, and you can't do anything without money. In any Fringe, any theatre world, money, puts on the shows. And the simple fact is, in Singapore, the ticket sales don't pay for the show. Everyone thinks, the theatre fills up, that will pay for the show. That is not the case. And actually, you notice on all of the programs and everything, when it says, season sponsored by a bank, or season sponsored by this, or this show is sponsored by this, those sponsors are the ones that allow us to put on such amazing work that we have in Singapore.
Yes.
So to lose that title sponsor that everybody's associated with this festival for the last 20 plus years is a huge deal. And I thought it was so interesting to kind of hear that kind of behind the curtain of how they kind of developed that. But what is beautiful, and we know this from open mic, and especially from my time at Sing Theatre as well, community is king.
Oh, yes.
And it was the communities that saved the Fringe Festival, because ultimately it's the community that's going to benefit from this. And as much as we hope everyone, general public, goes and appreciates the Fringe Festival, I think the people that learn the most from Fringe Festivals are the artists and the producers and the creative community that watch these sort of shows, learn from them, learn from each other, sharing. That's really the essence of what Fringe is about.
Yes,
and because I think sometimes things at Fringe can sometimes be a bit too fringe for general public. We've seen things at Fringe Festivals.
Yes.
But what I love about this year's is actually I don't think that will happen with any of the works that are being produced, because they all feel like something that everybody can resonate with.
Yes, and you can tell that that is the aim. With Haresh, with Invisible, with Sophie in our last episode, with Chalup, that the stories that they wanted to tell is to local audiences, so that they resonate, that they connect with it. And I mean, what better way to get not only the bums on seats, but also to keep the Singapore Fringe Festival a Singapore entity.
Yeah.
I think considering the journey that it's been on, I think it's going to do well.
I hope so, and I really hope that everyone listening to this is going to go and support it by buying tickets this year. But also, I feel like it is going to be something that without a title sponsor, we're going to have to keep supporting every year to kind of get it up and running and focus. So yes, they managed to raise that $50,000, but it's going to be something that doesn't last for the next 10 years. That lasts for this year. So it is a journey, but it is something that we should all be fighting to make sure it's still happening every year. So well done to everybody that got it to where it is.
Yes.
And let's enjoy the festival now for the next 2 weeks. But also let's make sure we keep the kind of fringe spirit alive and keep working. And also, if you are creative, just make work. I always say this to people, like, it's about just putting yourself out there and not being afraid to fail and being bold and brave. And without these platforms, people are not going to, these platforms make it easier for people to see that work.
Yes.
And so really excited, and thank you to everybody at the Fringe Festival for doing what you do.
Yes, thank you very much. And of course, listeners, you can find out more about all the shows and panels and on their website, on their social media, and go and book my show to get tickets as well. Anyway, my tea's gone cold, love. Shall we leave it there?
Yes, let's.
So that's cheerio from us. We'll be back soon.
And it's hurrah from me.
And to anyone working in Singapore Theatre for the next month.
And to all the performers and practitioners working at the Singapore Fringe Festival,
Break a leg.